Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Reckoning of Roku Chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for Chapter 51, which is called Let Go. Once again, YouTube channel membership is enabled on the channel if you'd like to help support, and subscribing also helps. So getting into this one, it's a really important chapter. I think more so because of the stuff that happens in the second half of the chapter, where it's obviously a big reveal for Sister Disa, but key information about Avatar Kyoshi. Not to say the first half of the chapter doesn't have anything to it, but it is more of a recap of like, Roku, you've been out for a while, here's what you've missed. That's kind of what we're doing here. So let's jump into that. So yeah, straight away at the start, we just get a quick recap of Roku tells Gyatso, I can airbend now, I can earthbend, haven't been able to waterbend yet. Oh, and you seem to have no problem with your airbending anymore. And Gyatso's like, yeah, since I started talking about Yama, that's been fixed, basically. The first really important bit of the chapter is Gyatso telling Roku about the attacks on the clan, that the village has been destroyed, and that the clan are basically holding all the earthbenders captive, basically, waiting to figure out what to do with them. Now, the way they're referred to is kind of interesting. The earthbender guards, Owen, and the other two earthbenders, who I think they mean Yu Ming and Chija, but again, just name them if that's who they are. I get it, maybe some of the other characters don't know them by name like Malia did, but just for clarity's sake, please just say that. There's been a few times where I think these characters have gotten a bit lost in the shuffle, but I think that's who they're referring to, because they say one of them confessed that the Queen had denied the Western Kingdom Trading Company permission to travel to this island since it belongs to the Fire Nation, but they came anyway. So that's important. The trading company did not have permission to go on this mission, in the same way Sozin didn't get permission from Taiso to come to the island either. So everyone was doing something wrong in all of this. But it's interesting that it's the Queen, the Queen of Omashu, that they go to get permission about this from, not the Earth King. Because it really highlights the Earth King Jaelun, has not been involved in the story basically at all. He's done actually nothing as far as we're aware in the story, even though we suspected he might have been heavily involved from a early point. But yeah, we're thinking it would be best to send them back to Queen Guojun to face justice in Omashu, but the clan have other ideas. They're not super into that idea. So that's just interesting in terms of how that works, how the leadership position in Omashu is different than the one in Ba Sing Se. I'm guessing because it's the Western Kingdom Trading Company, because it's close to Omashu, I guess, in the West. That's why they go to her for permission, but she said no, so she hasn't done anything wrong in this either. And again, if you want to know more about Jaelun and Guojun, read the Roku era information from the Avatar Legends RPG core book. There's more on those characters. But I suspect Earth Kingdom is probably going to be some of the focus of Book 2 for Roku, Awakening of Roku. Next we go to Ulo, and of course confirmation to Roku that yes, Ulo is dead, and we have to address this because Roku promised Gyatso he would try not to kill him, and this is what ended up happening. I tried not to kill him. The more I thought about it, the more I realized you were right. And Roku is expecting Gyatso to kind of argue with him, but he just kind of sits in silence and listens and is quite non-judgmental about the whole situation here. I think because Gyatso kind of understands that Roku already is in a position where he's thinking about it himself. He's having the discussion within himself about, was it the right thing to do? Could I have made different choices to make a different outcome? And so, in a way, does Gyatso need to, lecture Roku about, not killing, when he already seems to know that? Plus, I think Gyatso understands that the situation, was there any other option necessarily? Plus, Gyatso's got other things on his mind as well, as we will get to. We address Sozin. He was in worse shape than Roku, but both of them are doing okay now because of the clan's healer. So again, they do have a waterbender healer here on the island. She survived the attack, and so she was able to help everyone to recover. But the key thing with Sozin is that he's going to be taken back to the Fire Nation in the morning under, apparently, Fire Lord Taiso's orders. His companions are going to bring him home. So Roku's going to have to quickly get to a conversation with Sozin to address a lot of the issues here. Mainly, the big confrontation about why did you lie about the nature of this mission? That's going to be a big one. But from there, we address the kind of elephant in the room, and that is Malia. Because we know as the audience that she's dead, but we actually don't know like when Gyatso finds out, and so we address that here. Roku says, anyway, is Malia around? I'd like to thank her for helping me. And Gyatso is forced to reveal that, yes, they found her body yesterday in a collapsed section of the tunnels. And Roku's just like, oh, Gyatso. They go kind of forehead to forehead. Gyatso starts to kind of weep. And they just stay with each other for a little bit as Gyatso cries. And when he finishes, Roku says, may Malia's flame light our way, using the Fire Nation custom, the kind of more spiritual custom surrounding someone who has recently died. Gyatso says, thank you, friend. And we address the whole idea of, last I saw her, Gyatso, she was going into the tunnels with Sozin. Roku says he didn't see her inside. Did Sozin say what happened to her? And Gyatso looks away, that it was an accident, falling rubble. And two things happen here. One, Gyatso's not saying much about this, which is interesting by itself. Straight away, just the idea that Gyatso has been very vocal about criticizing Sozin when he can, but he has chosen not to in this instance. So, what's going on here? I will bring up a bit of logic that it feels like the book doesn't make, even though it probably should make, which is that apparently, if they have found Malia's body, they should know that's what Sozin said was a lie, because Malia was set on fire by Sozin. That's how she died. Her body should be horribly burned, and that should be a key piece of detail that effectively confirms that Sozin did something. And it's unclear if this is just information that Gyatso is not telling Roku, if he was ever told this in the first place. And so the thing going forward is, either way, Gyatso knows Sozin had something to do with what happened to Malia. If he knows about burns on Malia's body, then he basically knows for sure Sozin did it. If he doesn't know that information, he still suspects Sozin, but has no evidence whatsoever to say that. Either way, I guess it's just the idea that Gyatso's aware that this is a delicate topic when it comes to talking to Roku, talking about, the darker side of Sozin, and he just maybe doesn't want to bring that up, given the circumstances. There's maybe a time later to discuss this stuff. The other angle on this is, for Roku, when he hears that apparently what happened was that it was falling rubble, he blames himself for that, because Roku was the one who caused a lot of the seismic activity in the caves and cave collapses. That whole sort of thing. So there's a bit of guilt with Roku here about this, even though Sozin is actually the one responsible, because of course we find out he did lie as expected about the whole situation. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on that. Do you think that they just kind of forgot in the writing here that if they found her body, they must know that she was burned? And has that actually been reported on? And is it just that it hasn't been brought up in the text? Or is it being purposefully done in this way and that is in play? Not sure. Maybe this is a plot point to address in book 2. That they'll talk about this some more, but we'll see what happens. But then we get the arrival of Sister Disa. So before we can really go into anything between like Gyatso talking about Sozin, Disa arrives. She, of course, is just happy that Roku is doing well. We address a few things like, Lola was how everyone found each other, basically. Plus, the main thing she wants to know about is Gyatso told her everything except she doesn't know what happened between Ulo and Roku. So Roku explains being forced into the situation where to protect Sozin, he basically had to kill Ulo. He talks about connecting with Kyoshi, speaking to her, earthbending. And this is where Sister Disa tells Gyatso, may I speak to the Avatar alone? So Gyatso leaves, and we get some very interesting stuff here for the rest of the chapter. First of all, right before she starts to talk, we get Roku thinking about disobeying Disa and sort of the effects that this has had. As a result, several people had died. The Lombok clan's entire way of life had changed course, and knowledge of the island's power would surely spread. So you kind of weigh up the idea of stuff was still going to happen even if Roku didn't arrive. As far as we're aware, the Earthbenders were all going to be killed by Amihan. Malia still would have tried to protect them, but I think without Gyatso being around, Malia probably would have been killed by Amihan as well. So the entire Earth Kingdom party would have been taken out. I'm assuming eventually the trading company would have looked for them, and the island would have come back into focus in that way. So that's an interesting point. Plus, Sozin was always going to be interested in the island, and I think might have made his way back there eventually. Now, the thing with Sozin is interesting is that I guess he still would have gone to the library. It's just, would he have looked up information about the issue if Roku wasn't already on the island? Not really sure. That's an interesting point. But the idea is that the difference is sort of which people have died. Because Roku has arrived, more people on the island have died, like Ulo, other people involved in the clan, though, you know, you don't know what exact way the things would have gone, and that, like, would the islanders have been very easily able to take out all the earthbenders, or might there have still been some destruction, devastation anyway? Not super clear. It seems like Malia probably would have died either way, because her character arc was on course to basically still happen, and it's meeting Gyatso that kind of altered it a little bit. Interesting that it seems like eventually I think the Lombok clan was going to come into the kind of public spotlight one way or another. At least with the way things actually panned out, Roku is there, and he gets the significance of the island. He has had the character arc of realizing what it is to be a spirit of all nations, and so can advocate for the island, whereas that might not be the case if he was called to intervene much later after the fact, when a lot of other people have died. The clan is much more kind of heavily accused of just kind of slaughtering outsiders. That whole sort of idea. This way it feels like there is a bit more of a kind of chance under kind of new leadership for the island to join the world properly to a certain degree, and see what happens. So interesting to consider. But then we get Sister Disa talking, and she leads off straight away with a really, really interesting reveal. You and I were close friends in your previous life. We were. So straight away Roku's like, oh yeah, I've never really asked about Sister Disa's past or thought about it, but yeah, I guess she was chosen to be my airbending master because of this prior Avatar connection. Sister Disa says, she was as powerful an Avatar as everyone believes. Were you one of her companions? For more than 20 years. In fact, I was her final airbending companion. And so Roku asked the obvious question, so you must have been there when she died. We parted ways 2 years before she passed. Why? And Disa sighs. So, you know, it's something kind of more on the emotional side of things. You know how when you're flying on a sky bison, the people below shrink smaller and smaller the higher you go until they become specks that gradually fade away? Kyoshi had lived so long, become so powerful as Avatar, that I believed she had lost perspective on the inherent value of individual lives. Don't get me wrong, you could study the entirety of human history and you might not find someone who did as much good as she did for the world. But in her relentless pursuit of justice and peace, she seemed to hesitate less and less when determining whether the threat someone posed outweighed their right to live. So, this is fascinating here. So, of course, we get the details here. Disa was Kyoshi's last airbender companion from, like, when Kyoshi was, like, in or around 208, but she says more than 20 years, so in around that, like, early 200s, up to the point where Kyoshi was 228 years old. And she left for a reason she's going to explain shortly, but the lead into this explanation is the idea that Kyoshi had begun in her advanced age to lose sight of the value of individual lives and have begun to maybe make the decision easier and easier to end a threat by just executing the threat to bring justice and peace. And we know that this has been a thing that, is Kyoshi sort of like associated with. But because we got some extra kind of nuance to Kyoshi in the novels, like we got to understand it a little bit more. But they then begin to add in here, obviously talking about the aspect of Kyoshi we don't know much about, is what was she like when she was that old towards the end of her life. 200 plus year old Kyoshi is a character that we don't know that well. And now we find out that she had begun to maybe lean a little bit too much in that direction of, I'm the powerful avatar delivering justice from on high, and I have the power to make this choice about who is enough of a threat that they don't deserve to live anymore. And for an air nomad, you can see how that gradually begins to become a problem, that to a certain degree, Disha can understand, like in, I say, like the Roku Ulo situation, how sometimes conflicts just result in a way where, unfortunately, it's self-defense, one person dies or the other person dies, there's a fight, that's how it goes. But Kyoshi had too many situations come down to, I'm going to kill this person, which is quite interesting. She continues, after one mission, our last together, it turned out a Daofei leader in the Earth Kingdom we've been pursuing was the son of a man she'd executed many years prior. Every terrible thing he and his group of outlaws had done, and they had committed many of the worst atrocities you could imagine, had been for the sole purpose of drawing Avatar Kyoshi's attention so he'd have the chance to face her himself. And there's a pause to confirm that she also executed the son as well. And this is the last mission that Disha was on with Kyoshi. So you immediately, I think, get the idea of this was sort of the last straw. She was already sensing Kyoshi leading it down this path. And then this specific situation was just the final one. And she can't be part of this anymore. You killed someone. Their son then went on a quest for vengeance, basically, and committed all of these crimes just to draw you out. And then you did the exact same thing to them. You killed someone, created someone else then that you needed to kill, and you did the same thing. And this is just going to keep happening. That sort of idea. And she continues. After she settled the matter, I pointed out how that man's life had been shaped by her decision to kill his father. I asked her to consider how many of the fires we've been putting out all over the world might have been lit by her. I told her that I feared what she was becoming, what she might be if she lived another 100 years. Maybe I was wrong, but when I looked inward, that was what I felt to be true. So, really, really interesting stuff here. Disha kind of confronting Kyoshi about her actions, her approach as the Avatar. This is a brave move to do. Like, they obviously have known each other for quite a while at this point, but still, anyone standing up to the legendary, 200 plus year old Kyoshi is impressive. And Roku notes this. It says after this, Roku's respect for Sister Disha deepened, because he notes how intimidating it was in his kind of past life communication with Kyoshi to just speak to her, let alone being a companion of hers, having to kind of call her out a little bit. So yeah, addressing that idea of all of these things that we have to deal with. Like, do you think about how sometimes maybe you have inadvertently created some of these other ones that we have to do because you choose to end so many of these conflicts by just killing people, and maybe not thinking about some of the other ways to do this, or maybe thinking that to spare someone and that might be the better way to resolve the issue. And the idea that, in a way, I'm already worried about your decision making kind of now, and that you're hesitating less and less about doing this, but I really worry if you live a lot longer, what you will be then. That's the really interesting part of this, is that it's obviously a criticism of Kyoshi's approach as the Avatar, but there's also in here is a little bit of an idea of, are humans in the world of Avatar meant to live this long? that this is creating a bit of an issue, especially for someone with such power like the Avatar. Should someone like this be immortal effectively, and what that does to people? And the fear obviously with the Avatar, and we addressed this a little bit with Yang Chen, is the idea of, and to a certain degree with Roku, as he dealt with the idea of how he felt empowered by the cave, that's intoxicating to a certain degree, that the tendency that you could be that Avatar on top of the mountain, delivering justice, like as like a godlike figure being, is there. And that maybe in other aspects of Kyoshi, she's not like that. But when it comes to passing judgment on threats, she kind of had become like that. And it's already this bad now. 300 plus year old Kyoshi, that might be a major problem for the world if she judges maybe less and less notable things to be big threats. You know, there is a slippery slope kind of there overall. And the idea of, again, Disa this time looked inwards and felt that she had to say this to Kyoshi. That was the truth that she felt had to be said. And Roku says, I'm guessing she didn't like that you said that. To put it lightly, therefore I left, I shared my concerns with the council, word spread, and no other airbending master was willing to assist Avatar Kyoshi anymore. So that's interesting. She leaves as her companion, not wanting to be involved in this kind of, death, regular death anymore. She tells the air nomads about this, and the idea here is they all agree with her. None of them want to be the companion of the Avatar, who is probably going to go and bring you on a mission where she will kill someone, and you will feel like you are partially responsible for that death because you were her teammate on that mission. And for the air nomads, and how they feel about, killing, violence, that is a problem. And it's an interesting assessment from the outside of Kyoshi that the air nomads make that pretty big statement to just universally, we won't be your companions anymore. And that clearly must have a massive impact on Kyoshi because of the significance of kind of air nomads in her life, like her father figure, Kelsang. Air nomad, super important to her. And he already had to deal with his legacy sort of being tainted by kind of how the air nomads viewed things, and the idea that she's now getting into that territory herself, that must be something that makes her consider things overall. But Disa continues. Know that you do not need to be the same as Avatar Kyoshi to be a great Avatar. As the world changes, so too must the Avatar. And never forget what she told you when you connected with her. Everything is already within you. The real struggle is inward. Roku says, so you don't think we need Kyoshi anymore? No, we need Roku. You should rest now. Can I ask you one more thing? Disa says yes. And he says, I know you weren't there with her in the end, but do you know how she died? Because this is the big one here, and it's addressed in the text here, that for all the legend of Kyoshi, how long she lived, no one actually knew how death had finally managed to catch up to her. Sister Disa says, I don't, but perhaps she realized that sometimes people see us more clearly than we see ourselves, and then let go. So they don't lock it down in stone that this is exactly why Kyoshi died, but I think they effectively tell you why Kyoshi died here, is that ultimately the criticism, the advice from her companion, and then the effect that had on the air nomads made Kyoshi look inwards and realize that they are seeing her more clearly than she is able to really look at herself, and made the decision to be like, do you know what? They're kind of right. Maybe it is time for me to kind of wrap things up as the Avatar. And I'm guessing she stops doing the kind of immortality Lao Ge meditation technique to live for as long as she wants. And I'm guessing she just lasts another 2 years then after that without using the technique. Obviously, we don't know a lot of the specifics when it comes to that technique in terms of 200 plus year old Kyoshi, how old did she actually look on the outside? Did she always just for that whole 200 plus years look like effectively almost like 40-ish-year-old Kyoshi throughout the entire end of her reign, or what? And then when you stop doing the technique, like, what exactly happens? Does it slowly reverse itself, and then all of a sudden you go from maybe being effectively like you're 40-something years old to you gradually the age starts to actually take effect as you stop using the technique? It'll be interesting to know what the situation is, but the idea is obviously she lives 2 more years, dying at 230 years old. And I like this. I really like this as an insight into Kyoshi here. I think it has the right level of kind of critique of Kyoshi as the Avatar, while also acknowledging the strengths and positives of her as an Avatar. Is that she did affect the world in a huge way for a very long time, and created a certain amount of like lasting peace, but it also created a little bit of an environment in the world where people were sort of almost afraid of the Avatar. And you know, that's not a good reputation for an Avatar necessarily to have, that they tend to resolve a conflict with violence. They'll probably kill someone as like the first kind of thing that they plan to do in a conflict. That is the criticism you would have of Kyoshi as the Avatar, because when other avatars speak to her as a past Avatar, a lot of the times they do get the, oh, it's Kyoshi, she's just going to tell me to kind of kill them, and it's a little bit of a meme. And the novels have helped to kind of, I think, take it away from that to add nuance, and they're bringing a little bit of that back into play, but more as she advanced in age and lost maybe sight of herself a little bit, she maybe played a bit too much into that perception of her as being the Avatar who kills everyone type thing, that she started to become that, which I think from like a fandom perspective is an interesting angle to take on it. But this is the right way to do it, because I don't think anyone will be happy with the idea that some villain killed Kyoshi. That I think, given that you had set up the immortality technique, it was always going to have to be what happens in Kyoshi's life that makes her specifically choose to stop living for as long as she wants. Because Lao Ge kind of presents us the idea that she can pretty much live for thousands of years if she wanted to, theoretically. So the idea of her companions, the air nomads, all playing a role in helping her to see the problem and think that, you know, perhaps it's time to let go. I think it's the right way to do it. Obviously, I want more Kyoshi content. I'd love to see a story with a much older Kyoshi, to see what she was like on a more kind of day-to-day basis, and see some of those key events in her life. Like, you know, they obviously imply she's had many, many different team avatars, many companions over the years, but you ask questions like Rangi, like how long did Rangi live? How did the death of Rangi potentially have an impact on Kyoshi as a character? And it's that idea of almost like you add that into play of like the amount of loss she must have felt as she got later on in life, that must have also played somewhat of a role in maybe how she viewed kind of lives, that she has lost so much, she's maybe gotten used to it on the more emotional side of things, and how that impacts the idea of dealing with threats then. At the very least, it prompts some super interesting avenues of discussion about this as the kind of potential end of Kyoshi's life. I feel it's basically confirmed enough that like you can absolutely, I think, note that down kind of like on the wiki as effectively being how Kyoshi died. And I think it's really kind of well worked how they do it here, because the other angle on this as well is it's not just information about Kyoshi. The fact that this information is being told to Roku by one of Kyoshi's companions, that's interesting by itself. Roku is beating himself up about, I had to kill Ulo, I made a promise not to, but I ended up doing it. Is this the right way to do things as the Avatar? But the highlight here, the takeaway, is that no, we need an era where, like, that's not what the Avatar does to resolve conflicts. We need a Roku, not a Kyoshi. And it's so interesting because Roku is the Avatar who, in reflection on his era as the Avatar, we talk about the decision to kill or not kill Sozin. And was that the right thing to do or not? Because clearly Roku has been influenced by this event, this discussion, the need for a new era after Kyoshi to make the decisions that he ultimately makes. But it's a very much in hindsight, he might have saved a lot of people by killing Sozin. But was it in the moment where he had the opportunity to do so? Was it the right or wrong thing to do? I've always lent on the idea that I think Roku made the right choice. At that moment, I don't think he knew enough to know that Sozin would go on to do the terrible things that he actually did do. I think also the fact that his threat to Sozin of, if you step out of line again, I will kill you, works. He keeps Sozin in check for 25 years. And it's only the almost like random circumstance of Roku getting hit by the gas in the face, and finally Sozin having a moment where he's more powerful than Roku. And in fact, Sozin doesn't even need to do anything. Roku is just going to die from the environment here because of this disaster on his island. Sozin doesn't have to lift a hand, and he just has to leave, and Roku's gone, and he can do what he wants to do. And that's what he says: with you out of the way, all my plans are suddenly possible. So it's Sozin admitting that I couldn't act while you were around because you were more powerful than me. You kept me in check, basically. And that's the super interesting kind of part of this. That, again, the other part of this book is the friendship of Roku and Sozin. It was there right up until the end. And that's the real tragedy of the whole situation. And again, it's the nuance of the discussion of, like, I don't think it's just as simple as, like, Roku should have killed Sozin and that would have kind of solved everything. Because you highlight that if Malia had killed Sozin, like, a lot of stuff wouldn't have happened, but it would have changed events in a variety of other ways and stuff like that. It's just interesting to think about the whole way through. I really like what we got here. It makes Sister Disa feel so much more interesting and important as a character. You go back to the way maybe she was teaching Roku in the earlier chapters, and you realize that, yes, she's kind of purposely trying to kind of broaden Roku's horizons from an earlier point, so that he realizes that, like, we do need a nuanced Avatar and not maybe another Kyoshi, and that this is the right way to go about doing things. So the takeaway from the whole story being that Roku realizes that, no, like, you are right to think that things maybe should have gone differently with Ulo. It happens sometimes, but it's good that you feel bad about what happened. Don't forget that in a way, and don't get to a point where you feel that killing is the only way to do things and to demonstrate you are powerful as the Avatar. And the fact that, as far as we're aware, Roku's legacy in terms of the positive of his reign as the Avatar is his diplomacy. That he goes on to be known for having a great relationship with the air nomads and using that effectively across the world to maintain peace in an era where war is threatening in the background over a variety of issues, and he prevents war from breaking out in between multiple nations in different situations. And it's all because of his diplomacy and the skills that, in a way, Kyoshi didn't have as much, which is super interesting. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this important chapter here, Let Go. What do you think about Kyoshi, Roku's reaction to this information, the Sister Disa, even stuff with Roku and Gyatso earlier on in the chapter, especially when it comes to the whole how much he does or doesn't know about Sozin and the discovery of Malia's body, that sort of thing. But let me know that below. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.